It's our first refresh back. And Ciara Pressler, our new friend, is a game-changing leader who's helped hundreds of entrepreneurs, executives, and creatives, professionals. Who knows, after this session, it might be thousands, their full potential. She's the founder of Pregame, a Portland, Oregon-based business consulting agency and author of Game Plan: Achieve Your Goals in Life, Career, and Business. Well, Ciara, today is about goal planning, goal setting, goal attaining, right? And we're so glad you're here because your timing could be better.
New year, new goals, my favorite topic. It's a pleasure to be here. And Donna, you inspire me so much. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, it's great. Listen, I just want to give people, there's so many places we can start. And I know we want to start about people and their goals, but I want to start with you because I always think it's so fascinating. Like when I went, all your work, your books, they all have these sport themes to them, right? The plan, the game plan. Even today, like we'll talk about, Sherry, what's our three objectives? Can you speak?
The gym for your goals.
That's right. The gym for your goals. And yet you were an actress, actor, as you say, a producer, a writer, and now look at you. Tell us how that all works. Because I think as we set goals, sometimes we limit our goals based on what we've done before or we think we are, as opposed to like opening the world. And you have opened your own world to us.
Yeah, well, that's the first pro tip, right? Is that the road from where you are now to maybe where you want to be is very rarely a straight line. It's like a wiggle ziggle all over the place. And that was my experience. I found who I was doing some sports in high school, but I was more of a cheerleader, right? I was on the cheer squad and I liked cheering other people on and I liked entertaining people. So I really found who I was through performing in high school, theater and choir, and I studied music in college. And I went on to be in the performing arts for the first chapter of my career. And I was always really interested in what makes people successful because more, in sports, we judge more on merit. Like if you can kick the ball the furthest, you're making the team most of the time. But in the arts, it's way more subjective. So I was trying to figure out like, what is that? What are those factors that make people successful or make them kind of make it in this career? Meanwhile, to manage the stress of trying to do this career and different day jobs and the hustle in New York City, I discovered running. And so I didn't start running until I was pretty much out of college, and I really fell in love with it and ran tons of races, marathons, and I found that template to be really helpful for reaching my goals. So as I changed my career, I went into marketing. I worked in different companies that helped other people reach their career goals, mostly artists. And then I expanded out of that to help entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are also creative people. That's when I started bringing together these different worlds of like, what does it look like when you have to achieve a goal by a certain date because there's that opening night, there's that game day. What does it take when you have that no matter what attitude, but then also the structure of training for that day. And that's how I address business goals now.
All right, let's talk about business goals, right? Or how intertwined do you take your business goals and your life goals?
Wow. Well, I usually have two sets of goals, but I'm very conscious about the lifestyle that my business goals is going to create, right? So if you have a business goal of like tripling your income this year, is this going to leave you with space for your life goals? So you have to be conscious of those different things. And maybe there's different seasons. Maybe this year is a season of spending more time with your family, or maybe you're having your first child this year or something, and so you need to pull back. But maybe this is a year of investment and hustling and working hard. So I try to be really conscious about like, not only what am I doing and what effect is that going to have on the rest of my life in business, but also like, why? What's the point? What's motivating me? And is my motivation really on the right track? Am I doing this just out of my ego or because I think culturally it's the thing I'm supposed to do next? Or is it really truly what I want?
Right. And so as we sit here, all of us, and by the way, hey, Joy, I'm so glad to see you, and Michelle and Natalie. This is an invitation to converse. So anybody who has any questions, wants to jump in with a comment, please do. This is all our collective conversation at Generation W. Okay, it's a new year. I want to set some goals. Where do I start?
Well, I want you to start by not hating on the previous year, because even if you had a challenging year in 2022 or any other previous year, you still had some wonderful moments. So I think it's always good to celebrate yourself first. And that's why my company's called Pregame, because pre-gaming is having a party before you even get out on the field. So we always start with that. We also did a vision board jam last weekend with all of our friends here in Portland. And so we want to start by celebrating. So figure out what made you happy and what you're proud of from last year, because those will be the first clues about what you want in the new year. You also might need to look at what you didn't get to last year, but you really wanted to. Or my most powerful question that I ask people when they're setting goals, whether it's personal goals or professional goals, is I'll have them like, be still for a moment, maybe close your eyes. And I'll say, if we are sitting here on 1 year from now, so like say January 11th, 2024, and everything has worked out perfectly and wonderfully and with ease, what has happened? And it gives people just enough space from today and just enough possibility, like what you talked about with possibility and purpose, to think bigger and not have to know the how I'm going to get there, but just where I would like to be eventually.
So you think the first thing is to try to determine direction?
The first thing is to celebrate yourself and then think about that direction with that lens of possibility. You don't need to know how yet, just what.
Okay, that's fine. It's an interesting labor market right now in terms of business, right? We went from like nobody was working to having a lot of discretion relying in all of us workers, now to a point where the market seems to be, contracting. So there seems to be a little bit of a power shift in terms of people feeling comfortable or not. How much of that in terms of setting goals, being part of companies, being a contributor, accountability, how much of that kind of figures into your?
Yeah, and it's absolutely a factor, right? Because our goals have to be grounded in reality. Sometimes when you're just looking at, positive affirmations, it's like, you can do anything you want, you can manifest your dreams. And like, you also have to work toward things, right? And you have to accept the reality of what's going on around you. So, what I found on the company side, if you're hiring people, is the more clear you are on your vision, mission, and values, the more you will attract and be able to recruit the right people. Right? Because you need to tell them where this train is going in order for them to know if they want to get on it. And if they like where you're going, they're more likely to come along. On the other side of it, maybe you need that clarity from the company you work for, the organization that you work for, but tracking what you're doing and what's going well and your goals on your own is always going to serve you, even if you don't have that kind of culture in your company, because you're building those bullet points on your resume. You're building things you can share on LinkedIn. You're building a whole case for yourself in those reviews of why you're so valuable, why you should move up to that next role, why you should get that raise. So it should really be up to you to track all of those things, even if your company's not proactively doing that.
All right, now I'm an entrepreneur. When you have an entrepreneur, they show up at your office. I don't know how many of you here are entrepreneurs. I know that there's some senior executives here. I think we really we run the gamut in terms of people's experience. I want to make sure we can address them all. Tell me how you work with, how do you help entrepreneurs? I'm an entrepreneur. Tell me, what do I need to know, be aware of more to be better?
Yeah, entrepreneurs are our original clients. I've worked with entrepreneurs my whole career. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, so very intimately acquainted with the challenges and triumphs of entrepreneurship. Again, clarity of vision. A lot of times, the more creative we are as entrepreneurs, the more things we try to do at once. So I never tell clients that they can't do something, but we try to build a game plan for what they need to do in what order, so they don't undermine any of those dreams. So sometimes we take on too many things and it's difficult to do 100 things well. It's a lot easier to do 1, 2, or 3 things really well. So first we'll look at, where they want to go, maybe how much money they want to make, the revenue goal, the profit goal, the impact that they want to have. And we'll set specific measurable goals around that. But we also have to make sure the business model is sound, because if somebody says, oh, I want to make $1 million this year, but they're charging $10 per product. They have to move a whole lot more product than if they're charging $1,000 per product. So we have to look at the actual math.
Right. So you mentioned impact goals, and that really piqued we've talked a lot about that at Generation W, and of course, Generation Wow, you participated, and we have a little clip we'll show you later of you interacting with the girls. But tell me, what kind of measures qualify as impact goals?
Yeah, so we talk about 6 types of goals for business at Pregame, and impact is one of those. And impact could be community impact, especially if you're running an organization that has a mission to impact others or to help others or support others like you do. It can also be PR. It could also be about the legacy you're creating, about like media coverage, about events. So, Donna, you run an impact business, so every one of
I
your
hope
goals
so.
is an impact goal.
I hope so. Yeah, that is our driver, right? We want to impact people positively, right? So.
Right. And so your goals around that would be like the more measurable ways to know if you're doing that, or to be able to define to your team what you mean when you say you want to inspire women. So if I say, oh, my impact goal is to inspire women, it's like, how do I know if I'm doing that or not? So I want to make it more measurable and trackable. So I might say, I want to have a total of this many people on my mailing list, this many attendees at all of my events this year, press coverage in 3 national media outlets. Like I want to make it something really measurable, and then check the motives on if that's going to achieve the impact that you really want. But again, really defining what you mean by that, because then the team that's helping you achieve that goal knows what they're supposed to do. And the more clarity your team has, the happier they'll be.
Right. I know. And it's interesting. I've heard you say clarity many times now in all the different areas, as if it's easy to attain. I don't know how many of you find that even when you think you're being clear, I always think of this story is that when our family would have family dinner, the boys were probably 9 or 10 at the time. No, maybe even younger, probably 6. And I'd say, okay, we're going to go around the table and tell it and say something that happened to you that was special this week. And literally one of my sons got up from his chair and walked around the table. And when you think about clarity, I mean, and you can say, oh, he's little and he didn't understand, but the idea is he did exactly what I said. And there's so many times when I feel like we're communicating and think we're communicating, but we're miscommunicating.
Yeah, and that's a practice. One thing I always like to talk about is we have achievement goals, like something that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And then there's habit goals. And, the secret is habit goals are who we become. And so if I want to communicate more clearly, I can have that intention. I can have a reminder to do that. And I can, get a little bit better each day by paying attention to it. And of course, you have immediate feedback, like your son walking around the table, of whether you're communicating clearly. And that changes by audience, right? The way I communicate clearly with a 5-year-old is differently than the way I communicate clearly with a 55-year-old.
Although I have to say, there are times that I think 5-year-old lessons are really good for 55-year-old colleagues. No judgment here. I'm just saying there are times in my head thinking, and even for me, I'm like, if I was that colleague, being very receptive to very clear, simple kind of language, even, and interestingly enough, the more complex the issue, I feel like the more, right, it's easier to embrace when it's a little bit more simplified in terms of the language and the processes to get there. I know Mary is on this call, and she runs a big global business and has a lot of complexity. So I'd be interested to hear what she thinks about that. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. And it's actually in our job descriptions that you need to be able to explain it like I'm 5. What I find in, the biggest product that we offer in our business is strategic planning. So we go in and help organizations and companies set their 3 to 5 year goals and their game plan for getting there. And I find in the industry of people who do strategic plans, you get a lot of like academics and people who, quite frankly, I think just like to hear themselves talk, but they're not really there to serve the client and getting stuff done. And that's what we're there to do. We want it to be in very plain language so anyone could pick up this handbook and read it and do it. And, I think it's more important to be understood than to sound smart, because that really serves your audience.
Yeah, and creates, right? Yeah, Katie, all right, I'm just talking. Here's our Facebook group. We follow the SMART method for goal setting. We've done that with our girls too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Thanks,
Yeah,
Becky.
it's funny, like truth is truth, right? And when I wrote game plan, I didn't know about SMART goals, but I made the same kind of the same method, but without the cool acronym. So it's the same thing. SMART goals, I believe it's simple, measurable. Is it achievable? I don't know what R is. We have
Becky,
our own. Yeah.
anybody?
Yeah. So it's basically the characteristics a goal needs to have. So I say simple, realistic, honest, measurable. It's what you really want right now. So those are the characteristics of a goal. So when we do the game of goal setting, we'll do a goal check, and it's okay if your first draft isn't perfect. We'll just tighten it up so that it's a stronger goal, because when your goal's too vague, or if it's not really what you want, you might sabotage it.
Without a doubt. So just to reiterate, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And then I have like there's I just looked it up here, and people like switch it up a little bit. Somebody might say timely, but time bound. So it gives you all of the different aspects of setting goals, which is really helpful. Let me ask you this: some of your best successes, when you think about where you've been able to really help and see the impact of your work.
The first thing I thought of when you said best successes, because I didn't know you were going to ask that, was actually just my friendships. But I think that goes into business too. I'm somebody who like keeps friends throughout life and keeps in touch with my best friends from junior high, my best friends from high school, my friends from my 20s, like all of that. And I feel like I'm very wealthy in relationships, but I've done that professionally too. And when people that maybe I'm mentoring or just in general ask me, like how to be successful, I say, do good work and take care of your network. I started my career before social media, right? So I had a Palm Pilot where I kept all of my contacts, but every time I moved jobs, I sent that email, told everyone what I was doing. When I started my first business, I sent that email, told everyone what I was doing, periodically keep in touch with them. And so, if I read an article that I think, oh, Donna would love this, I send it to Donna. I don't just think a compliment. I try to tell people when I see something they're doing on LinkedIn and they really rock, like I'll go beyond the LinkedIn comment and send them an email or a text message or something like that. It's about making other people feel good and staying connected.
No, and I love that. I love that. But I think in this day and age, everything feels overwhelming. Are you hearing a lot of that? I feel like it used to be, okay, I have to manage my phone and my voicemail. And maybe I have my voicemail at home and then I have my voicemail at work. Now, at least I have just my voicemail on my cell phone, but then I have my LinkedIn, then I have Facebook, then I have Instagram, right? I'm trying to think. It just feels like there's so many different ways to communicate that it feels overwhelming.
Yeah, it feels like clutter, right? Like when you're in a room with too much stuff and you like can't think clearly. I'm personally really disciplined about like work hours and like not texting people that work with me on the weekends and all that. Like I have a lot of boundaries, and I had to learn all of that the hard way, believe me. I have a lot of boundaries. I also have, the privilege of having certain boundaries because I am a company owner. So you don't always have that if you have incoming stuff from your boss or your clients. Your clients are your boss, even if you're a company owner, and you have to get back to them. But it's the way you kind of onboard that client or onboard a relationship, the way you started out, being really clear again in what's appropriate communication helps a lot. And social media is always a tough one, but I try to really be mindful of whether social media platforms give me energy or zap my energy, and make decisions based on that.
And the answer would be yes. And yes, wouldn't it be? We work with girls, as you know, and the girls in all of us. And social media is so incredibly challenging. And at least it's coming to the fore now. And there's a lot of movements now where people are really putting down the devices or putting them aside in order to connect personally, humanly. I just think that's I think that's a real positive. All right. Well, you have created, let me just say, everybody who came in a little bit late, all of us on Facebook, say hello to Ciara Pressler, right? She's talking to us about goals today. And you created a gym for goals. Let's take a look at some of your ideas and share that with, and let's go through them together if we could. Here we go. And then we'll come back to your question, Marta. Choose your goals based on your identity. I was very intrigued by this. Which identity am I putting out there?
Right. So when I started Pregame in 2016, we called it a gym for your goals. It was a physical space before the pandemic of a place where you could come every day and get business coaching or take workshops here in Portland, Oregon. And now it's virtual and we have our online platform. So we call it a gym for your goals, very lovingly. And the first one, choosing goals based on your identity. You know, like I said about habit goals, you know, what you practice is what you become. So I try to be mindful about my motive for choosing a goal. And, you know, if I'm practicing something every day, that's who I am eventually, right? And so you are what you do. I think, you know, even just in making new decisions, I'm trying to think of a very small example. You know, it's sort of like, you know, we have some new employees starting here, you know, last week, and how am I going to greet them in a certain way every morning or give them a high five every evening? You know, like what kind of boss do I want to be? I'm trying to be really mindful of like those little tiny moments because they add up, right? They really add up when they're happening every single day.
Right, and they do, and I have to just say, I see that, I saw that in you again. After the show, we'll roll Ciara interacting with our WOW girls, so I can see that for sure. Know the difference between achievement and habit goals, and I heard you say that earlier. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the example I like to use is, you know, say you're making a fitness goal. Is your goal to like run a 10K and get it on your bucket lists? Or is your goal to have a fitness habit, you know, a long-term fitness habit? So you might still run that 10K, but your focus is on getting out the door and hitting the pavement 4 times a week versus just do enough to hit that 10K goal. The actions getting there might be similar, but your focus is different. The way this applies in business.
Yes, that was my question. Yes.
As we were doing sales training at Pregame, we found that when teams focus on the revenue goal, which you still have to have that revenue goal, that sales goal, it's not as good as when they focus on the habits and the numbers they have to do every day. So there's the revenue goal that's way out there and it might seem overwhelming at first, but if I just look in front of me and I think, okay, I need to follow up with 3 people today. Like that's very doable. And if I do that every day and keep getting better at that, I will hit that revenue goal.
So that's in line with some of the reading we've done on 1% change, right? 1% change doesn't seem like a lot, but 1% change at the end of a certain amount of time actually is considerable of that. We always talk about with our WOW girls, incremental steps can create exponential change. And I guess that's what we're talking about here, right? The attainable, focusing on the attainable, do not get sidetracked by the overarching or the things that could distract you because they seem unattainable. And so therefore we have achievement and habit goals. Okay, that's great. I mean, I tend to try to think about that. Eat the elephant one bite at a time. Yes.
It's so hard for me because I'll have these big ideas and I like instant gratification. And, you know, I think that's sort of our culture too. And you'll see somebody else doing something sometimes and you'll be like, I want that and I want it right now. And I'm not always patient about those practices. So that's the other thing, right? Is like choose your goals based on what you're willing to practice every day or every week. Because I've definitely been around people who chose a big goal like running a marathon and they hated running. And so they were terrible to be around all the time. Like, please don't be that person.
Right. No, that's true. We want to be happy in pursuing our goals.
Yeah.
As possible.
But then wherever you end up, if you don't hit your destination, you still have a great result, right? You still become the kind of person you want to be.
Right. And that's really important. Accountability is the game changer. It's funny, Sherry and I had a conversation prior to this just about accountability in general today. Is it different than yesterday? What's your thoughts on this?
think so. I think the principles are the same. You have to figure out, you have to kind of hack yourself a little bit and know what kind of accountability works with you. I kind of care a little bit about what other people think about me. So sometimes I will like kind of blow myself up and share my goal publicly, because then I feel like I have to do it, because my identity is I don't want to be the kind of person who doesn't do what she says she'll do. So when I really want to stay accountable, I will like post it or tell a bunch of people what I'm working on, and that kind of makes it real. And then I'm like, oh, I have to do this now. But there's so many ways to be accountable. Some of the really essential ones, like writing it down, telling someone else who's going to be supportive, but still tell you the truth. A lot of times I'll say, don't make your accountability partner your best friend, right? Because your best friend's more invested in staying your best friend than they are in maybe telling you what you don't want to hear. But sometimes we have those great friends who do tell us in the right way what we do need to hear. So yeah, other people.
I have to say, I like those friends. I do, and appreciate those friends. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a sign of maturity when we really appreciate those friends more, who will like kind of pause and say, you said you wanted this, but I see you doing this opposite action. Right. In a loving. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Marta has a question. How do you balance setting boundaries with expectations and the drive to being successful? That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to tap into some of like this brain and your gut brain. I'm like touching my stomach right now, versus being totally driven by this brain, right? So in my head, I'm like totally goal oriented. I'm like pushing. But if I push too hard on the weekends, my body is tired, right? Like I've even pushed myself to burnout before for different factors. And so you can overdo it, certainly, right? And just like in sports, if you go too hard, you might get a stress fracture and then you can't move toward that goal at all. So I think there's that balance in any type of goal.
I'm sorry, you just put me in a lot of different thought places, and I'm trying to think because and again, Sherry and I were talking about this earlier. I mean, and I talked about it with my kids last night. Like there were weeks in my, like when I was young and coming up, I worked 100-hour weeks. I worked 60-hour weeks. I worked 70-hour weeks. It was what was expected. Okay, we live in a different world now. But what doesn't change is if you want to succeed and you want to set goals and achieve them, they require a level of focus and sacrifice to get you there. And I don't know how you shortchange that.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think sometimes, even very conscious people will have a sort of sense of entitlement about our goals. And we're not owed everything. And so it does take work and sacrifice, and being thoughtful about whether you're willing to make that sacrifice is really important. Like sometimes, people will say, oh my gosh, you're doing this thing or you're doing that thing, but they don't think about the things I'm not doing. I've chosen my life and my lifestyle, but it's not the same as everybody else's. Some people will have a different identity or life balance that they'll strive toward.
Right. So I'm a mom, I'm a working mom. And, we have these discussions all the time about life balance and what you can do and what you can't do. And I've made some very, very strategic and distinct decisions in my life that took me away from my kids for a certain period of time, or others. And people say, well, you have this or you don't have this, but we make choices, right? And I think you're right. We're not, and the idea that we're all entitled, I think in a way undercuts our own sense of realistic accountability for where we are.
I totally agree. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. I mean, I've spent 13 years building my own business, in one format for a while, and then Pregame the last 6.5 years. And I could afford a ton of risk because I don't have any dependents. I don't have kids, I can live, in lots of different lifestyles, but if I had to live in a certain house, if I had to have a certain car, if I had to have, pay tuition or something like that for kids, I wouldn't be able to absorb the level of risk I have been able to as my businesses went like this. Right. And so some of why I've been able to be successful or in a place that's more comfortable now is because I could absorb a lot of years where maybe the revenue wasn't at the level where I could tend to a different type of lifestyle.
Right. Well, I think many of us have lived on friends' couches while we figured it out, right? All those kind of things. I mean, there's different stages of different lives of your life and at different career points as well, which is when if anybody here is thinking of switching career paths or lifestyles or setting new goals that they want to see, in 2023, spending more time here and there. It is a matrix, right? Do you create a matrix for your clients?
We will do work around personal goals. We'll do work around business goals as well. My clients tend to be more mature and are motivated by having a balanced life. I don't work with people who are doing like the startup fundraising hustle whole thing. Yeah, it's just not my thing. I like real revenue. I like people who are trying to leave a legacy, people who have something really brilliant to offer the world, and they're just interested in how they can do it more authentically and with a bigger audience. Like, those are my people. And so I tend to work, my clients tend to be, in their 40s or 50s, like at their, what I call their career peak, right? And they're not coasting till retirement, but they have some big stuff they still want to do.
Yeah, right. There's still big stuff we want to do. Yes. Tell us about your books. A little bit, what was your motivation to write them? Rylander will post them for us, but tell us about what's the learning that you were hoping to impart?
Yeah, so my first book is called Exit Stage Right. And it was sort of a love letter to being in the performing arts, but so many people start their careers as performers and then retire or have to move on to something new. Same as sports, right? You start out as an athlete and you can't really be an athlete till retirement unless you retire very early.
Oh, please don't tell me that. I still think I'm an athlete, but go ahead.
Okay, yes. But maybe you can't play on that pro team.
Nobody's paying me. Yes, correct. Nobody's paying me to be an athlete.
Yeah, and so it's the same thing with performers, like dancers as athletes, right? Professional dancers often retire at like age 27, 28. And then there's always this existential crisis of what do I do now? Who am I? And there was no guide to that. So when I went through this isn't the career for me, like it was great for 5 years, but I really want something different. There was no guide, and I sort of figured it out. And so I felt like I had some things to help other people with, when you don't even know how to write a business resume, you've only written an acting resume before, what do you do? And so this is a handbook for that. And then Game Plan came from years of just helping my friends with their goals. And as that started to merge with my business of helping my clients with their goals, about 8 years ago, I published Game Plan, and it's actually a workbook. So we go through life goals, career goals, and project goals. So that could be a business, a fundraiser, a nonprofit, any sort of initiative. And breaking down, your vision, the goals, who's going to help you on your team, the actions you're going to take, the obstacles you might encounter and how you might mitigate that risk, and then how you're going to celebrate and take care of yourself along the way.
Well, I like that part because we do need to take care of ourselves along the way. We only have one us. I do want to add that I did write an article for the New York Times when I was 23 or 24 years because I was retired. I actually wrote that. Here I am, and I am retired. My career is over. It wasn't because my body broke down. It was because the business broke down, but that's a whole other story, right?
Yeah.
You were fantastic with our girls at Gen Wow in Portland. We found you through, as you said, the network. The network brought us you. And the way you connected, the energy you brought to the stage, everything was just fantastic, which is why we wanted to continue our conversation. But I wanted to share with everybody because this is our 10th anniversary of our Generation Wow programs. And we celebrate the positive and the possible. And you brought out some good stuff from some nice young girls. So Sherry, if we could, let's show Ciara in her other element. Here she is.
I want to ask you, what can the adults do to support you? Because you're the next generation leader. How can adults be making the world better for you?
Being just really supportive and knowing that we are going through hard times and just sticking by us no matter what, and knowing that we are trying our best.
Listening to us and knowing that we're capable and helping us form those meaningful connections that we need, like introducing us to doctors if we want to be doctors, or lawyers, or connecting us with people that can help us get to where we want to be and help us get to that next level.
Yes, you're smart. You can do whatever you want to do if work hard and take care of each other, because like I said, the relationships are what make it worth it and what help you get to where you want to go.
One thing that I'm feeling after going to Generation Wild today, I'm just feeling really inspired and empowered.
I'm feeling more confident.
I'm feeling just hopeful and positive.
I bet you didn't know that we had made, what do you think? Look at you.
Getting tears in my eyes. I mean, first of all, it was such an honor to share the stage with you and with the other women that you brought there, because, you know, there's all these like Olympians and former professional athletes. And then I am so intimidated by those teenage women.
I know, they're adorable, right?
To like bring back all this high school stuff. They're
Well,
so
you were
cool.
in your high school varsity jacket. You were perfectly attired.
Yeah, no, I mean, I loved high school. I totally thrived. And so it was super cool to hang out with them. And like I said, I don't have daughters. And so it was just so fun to hang out with them. And it's so cool to see that video.
Yeah, no, we actually, we made you the star of it. There you go. You were like our hostess of that. Any last questions from our Gen W community? I'd be happy to put any of them forward. You said that career transition was really important to you. I think transition seems to be, it's not the word of the year, you know how they always pick a word of the year, but it could be. I feel like I'm always talking to people who are transitioning in some way. You could be at the same job and you're transitioning in some way, mindset, whatever. How again, what's your coaching around that?
Yeah, we're never not transitioning, right? I think it's really good to have a baseline to return to. So like what grounds you, what are those habits? It could be your family and like quality time with them. For me, it's stuff like my mindfulness practice, you know, some of my spiritual practices, hanging out with those friends who I've known for 30 years, because even if I don't achieve the goal I'm working on, or even if I don't know what I'm doing in this moment, they don't love me based on my achievements or my job title or even how I'm feeling on a given day. They love me because we're a family of choice. And so coming back to that community is what keeps me somewhat stable in those moments of transition. And then, you know, as we get older, we've been through a lot of cycles, right? It keeps cycling. And so we know that it's not the end of the world, even if we're not having our best day.
True. And we love communities, and we're hoping maybe, Ciara, that you will travel east, and anybody else. Oh, Allie Tucker. Hi, Allie. Baseline community. So we have a baseline community. It is local, regional, national, virtual. Generation W, we are well in the throes of planning Generation W for 2023. Our theme is, as I've said earlier, the positive and the possible. We have amazing speakers. The feeling is living in the world we're living in now, which is filled with transition, change, you know, the sand below our feet always seems to be a little shifting. Isn't it great to come together in community and really focus on what is positive and what is possible, so that we can leave, you know, maybe our feet not quite touching the ground, so we won't feel those shifting sands, although we will learn how to deal with them that much better. So March 24th, for those of you who come from away, we have a beautiful host hotel. We hope that you will be with us for Generation W, the positive and the possible. We'll also hope that you'll be with us as the community continues 2 weeks from now, when we have our very special guest, the Mayo Clinic's Dr. Nilüfer Erturken Tanner. She is an amazing woman. I've listened to some of her talks already. She's a neurogeneticist. Listen, I want to say I'm asking her to come on the show because I can't remember things, because nobody I know, whenever I'm with my 20-year-old friends, my 30-year-old friends, they can't remember. I'm like, thank God. But, you know, there's a lot of talk these days about therapies and early diagnostic biomarkers for Alzheimer's, as well as overall mind healthiness. More than 10 million women in the United States are either living with or caring for somebody with Alzheimer's. And she brings such incredible firsthand research, knowledge, and experience. And I know that she will bring a lot to the community in terms of advancing our knowledge and helping us to better understand how we care for ourselves, like you said, Ciara. So perhaps we will not be one of those cases as time goes by. So I want to thank you. I always do this. This is one of my, I always take a little note before you leave. Like I love when you said life is not a straight line. It never is. And there's lots of wiggles. So I am leaving you with the wiggles. And I saw your wiggle at Gen Wow, maybe a little bit of giggles as well, and with a lot of gratitude. So thank you, Ciara. Thank you to our whole Generation W community, for everybody who's joined us. Happy New Year. We get to say it one more time when we see you at our next show on, what's that date, Sharon? You put it up there, and I am going to look at the calendar. Aha, the 25th of January. See you then at noon. Till then, God bless.